Hello, I'm Janet Pearl, and I'm a member of the Potawatomi Trail of Death Association. I'm a member of the Potawatomi Trail of Death Association Board of Directors, and we have a mission to collect, preserve, research, and interpret the history of the 1838 Potawatomi Trail of Death. I am a descendant of a little girl who was 6 years old when she walked on the Trail of Death from Indiana to Kansas in 1838. And my father told me the story about this as he heard it from his mother, as she heard it from her mother, who heard it from her mother, who was the little girl that grew up in Kansas, to tell the story. And so I'm continuing to tell the story here today. It was in early September of 1838 that General John Tipton called for a council of Potawatomi leaders from Chief Menominee's village in Twin Lakes, Indiana, to come together and get together everybody that lived there and get their things together and start marching towards Kansas. It was a 2-month trek that took them until November to get there, and they were under gunpoint. Chief Menominee would not sign his land away, so they put him in a jail wagon along with some other chiefs, and made the rest of the group, 859 people, walk for 2 months to Kansas. There were 41 deaths, mainly children and elders, along the way, and they were just buried where they died. There was a priest, Father Benjamin Petit, who was with them, and he would pray over the dead, and then they would be buried. It was getting to be winter, and they had to exist in these sort of cave-like structures, the stony walls that they could find near creeks and stuff, and put up furs and blankets to try to exist in the cold weather, and that was what the first winter was like. They were supposed to have housing when they got there, and there was nothing there. And then the missionaries came, and they brought a carpenter and supplies, and then they built some housing. And so they were able to live in houses, and then they were able to get together more structures and such for the 10 years that they lived there. But then they moved from Sugar Creek to St. Mary's, Kansas, and they established, the Jesuits established a college and a school for boys, and the Sacred Heart nuns established a school for girls. And my great-great-grandmother and her sister went to the school for girls and then grew up, and they continued to live there and work as housemaids, I guess it was. And then that's where Teresa, she was baptized as Teresa, living because she survived. She met James Slavin, and he was a driver for the bishop from Kansas City, and he was Irish from Ireland. And they married in St. Mary's and had children. And then that's how my family came about, from that union. Her daughter was my dad's great-grandmother, or grandmother, and then it moved on down. And his mother told the story to him, and now he's telling the story to me, and I'm telling the story to the world. I don't have any children, so I decided to make it a bigger story bigger audience. What were they like? Well, they had a thriving village in Indiana. They had lived there for many years. Some had come from Michigan to live there, and Chief Menominee was a good leader. He had many followers, and he was a strong leader. He loved the land that they were on. It was the land that was theirs, that they had been born on and lived on, and he didn't want to give it away. They grew rice, and they fished, and they hunted. They worked with French fur traders, and had a lot of enterprise going on with the French from Canada, coming down from Canada. The priest was there. They had a chapel, and many of them were baptized Catholic by the priest. There was a regular village, a regular life going on there, and it was all destroyed by the government, the United States government, who sent in soldiers, and they burned their village and destroyed their crops before they took them away. It was just, really mass devastation of their lifestyle. And then they had to either walk or ride in wagons, or some rode on horses over this 600 and some mile trip for 2 months, and they just stopped by creeks and rivers to get there. There was a lot of tainted water. There was bad food. They had typhoid. They were sick. Many of them died of exhaustion or exposure, and it was just a nightmare. My father and his sister are the ones who told it to me. His sister is Sister Virginia Pearl. She's a sister of St. Joseph of Concordia, Kansas, a nun. And their mother would tell them a story about how their great-grandmother went on the long walk. And they said that their mother's face would grow white with sorrow and terror when she talked about how the trauma that they went through to go through this walk and how they lost everything. And we think that their parents died on the way, or something happened, because they didn't have any parents when they got to Kansas. They were basically raised by the Sisters of the Sacred Heart, who were missionary sisters, and that's where St. Rose Philippine Duchesne came in. She was a Sacred Heart sister who worked with the Potawatomi in Kansas and was later canonized as a saint by the Catholic Church. And we believe that she worked with my great-great-grandmother and taught her how to pray. And that was really an exhilarating thought, to think that a member of our family worked with a saint, was taught by a saint, and learned her Catholicism from her and from Father Petit as well. He started going on the Trail of Death caravan in 1988, and he's been on every one of them since then, every 5 years. There's been 7 of them, I believe, since then. And he's 96 years old right now and not in good health. So I don't think he'll be able to go on the one next year. But I plan to go and continue the tradition of our family being involved. His sister has Alzheimer's now, and his other siblings have passed on. So I feel it's my duty to continue the tradition and be involved. And that's why I'm on the board planning this, and want to stay as involved as I can. We have members from all the states that are involved in the trail, and there is the church that is in Mound City, Kansas, where it is near the shrine of St. Philippine Duchesne, where we end up at the end in Sugar Creek, Kansas. They have a group of men that are the Knights of Columbus organization, and they take care of the park and they maintain it, and people come from all over the world to see this because of St. Philippine Duchenne and the Potawatomi, and they want to be where she was and where the Potawatomi were. The Potawatomi lived there for 10 years after they had walked to that location, and many of them did die there. And there are many crucifixes, tall crucifixes there that have their names on them. And it's a very holy place. It's very rural and kind of desolate, like it was when they lived there. But it's a very spiritual experience to go there and know that your ancestors lived there and how they lived and what they went through to get there. And when we go on the caravan, it's a week-long experience. We drive the 660 miles to follow along where they went. We don't walk it, but there have been people that have walked it in other groups. And it's exhausting, and it's emotionally exhausting as well. And you feel like you're suffering. Sometimes it's very hot. Usually in September, it's still very hot during the day, and then it gets cold at night. And when they were walking it, they went through until November, so then they got into the cold months too. And you just realize how much they went through and what they went through for our freedom today. And I think we should remember that as proud Native American citizens today. We should remember what our ancestors went through and honor it. There's a statue to Chief Menominee in Twin Lakes, Indiana, and there's a museum nearby in Rochester, Indiana, that is run by the Rochester Historical Society, and they honor the Potawatomi. And Mrs. Shirley Willard, who was the one who started the caravans, she's a retired school teacher. She's in charge of the museum along with Melinda Klinger, and she can tell you every story there is about the Potawatomi. She's not Potawatomi herself, but she's an honorary Potawatomi member because she spent all her time over these years getting the caravan together, and they have a festival every year to honor the trail, and they call it the Trail of Courage Festival in September. They honor a family every year at the Festival of Courage that is a Potawatomi family that was related somehow to the trail. Yes, it did happen to many different tribes. And the Potawatomi actually were here in Ohio as well. And there are a lot of places, like I went to the Cleveland Public Theater, is it? And they acknowledged that this land was held by the Potawatomi and other tribes before they started the show, and they thanked them for giving it up to us now. And that's something that people are starting to do in different locations, is recognizing that the Native Americans didn't own it, but they had this land originally, and it was taken from them, and now we're using their land to give them credit for where they lived before it was taken away from them. And I think that's really a wonderful thing that they're doing that now. There's 39,000 members of Potawatomi Indian, the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. We go by descendancy and not quantum blood, and so we have a lot of members, and I want as many people to know as possible, so I'm glad to have this opportunity to share the story.